People in Wichita had been terrorized by the BTK killer for 30 years.
BTK has killed 7 people, Chief. What kind of leads do you have?
No solid leads at all.
When they finally announced that there was a serial killer on the loose, what was that like for you?
That was a pretty big buzz.
The one thing BTK likes more than anything else is publicity.
When he went uncaught, it just confirms for him he's smarter than the police.
The question for Wichita back then is how many more people are going to die?
After BTK was apprehended, detectives searched his office and his home and came up with a stash of Polaroids that looked as if there were male victims. And they asked him who his male victims were. And he didn't understand what they meant, and they mentioned these Polaroids. And then he said, "Oh, that's me."
I always had the tripod, and so I rigged that up, and lo and behold, I could take pictures of myself. And then what I had was a squeegee ball. And basically, you ran the cord over to your hand, and then somewhere I hid the ball when I was in my pictures, and I just squeezed that ball, and the Polaroid would click.
He would dress in slips and female underwear that he had stolen. He would wear a mask that had makeup on it, a wig.
I used the cross-dressing and tying myself up as a sexual fantasy, like I was the victim.
Rader told himself that acting out these fantasies helped him diminish the desire to kill somebody. But on the other hand, he's also completely immersed in what it's like to be a victim, feeling the ropes around him, wanting to do this to somebody. And the more he did that, the kind of ensured that he would act out again.
Well, good morning.
Hello, Dennis. I'm Dr. Catherine Ramsland, professor of forensic psychology and the author of multiple books about extreme offenders like serial killers. I've been corresponding with Dennis Rader to try to understand what led him to become one of the most notorious serial killers in America. This is the first time that Rader has explored these topics in depth with anyone.
People call me a monster. I guess I am sort of a monster.
The more information we have about serial killers, the more we understand what makes them tick, the easier it will be to prevent them. Sexually compelled serial killers tend to get addicted to what they're doing. They tend not to have control over the addiction, but Rader did take breaks. He went 3 years. He went 5 years. So he stands apart from many of them in that it's more an identity thing. He wants to be a serial killer than that he can't help himself, because he could help himself. And did. Through the work I've been doing with Dennis Rader, I'm hoping to dissolve some stereotypes to include outliers like him and show that we need to accommodate more data than we have in the past about serial killers.
The most important thing that everyone can do is certainly be aware that we do have a very serious problem.
When the announcement came out from the police that there was a serial killer in Wichita, Rader found that exciting. Finally, he had gotten some attention, even though they didn't know who it was. He enjoyed the idea that he was terrorizing the Wichita area.
The hunt began Friday when Cake received this letter from the man police say is the killer of 7 people over the past 4 years. He calls himself the BTK Strangler and promises to kill the enemies.
I knew they would say something about it on TV. You know, BTK sent us a letter. That was an extremely big high, I can tell you that.
Why do you think you wanted this recognition?
Along my childhood, I've always felt like I was an underdog. And that, somewhere along the lines of getting a high in recognition, I think it's like the movie stars and stage people, they see the picture in a newspaper or a story about them. I think they get a rush on that.
Rader never grows up in terms of the attention he needs. It all goes back to that arrested development.
Of course, keep in mind, you're not dealing with a, quote, normal criminal. Assuming that the person is still alive, that person is going to kill again.
When Chief Lemunium announced that we did, in fact, have a serial killer, people were frightened. It had changed the entire complexion of how people went about their daily routines in Wichita.
Police were just baffled. They didn't have an answer. Usually if somebody got murdered in Wichita, we had an answer pretty quick.
Saying Wichita and the term serial killer in the same sentence, I never thought I'd do that. And particularly terrifying for young women, because are they going to be next? And that's what everybody thought. BTK messed with your mind. He was controlling the police department, he was controlling the news media, and he was controlling the public.
While Wichita is reeling in fright, Rader is going about his business, pursuing his degree in the administration of justice. While you were in school, you were also committing your own crimes. Were you listening for things that would help you?
Yes, I was very careful with the forensics. I made sure I didn't leave my fingerprints. I wore rubber gloves, ones that you use when you're washing dishes.
He learned a lot about how police investigated crimes, which helped him to know what to do, what to avoid. That subject matter just helped him to become a better predator. What did you want to do with your degree?
I tried for the Wichita Police Department, I tried for the Sheriff's Department, I tried for the Highway Patrol, and all three of them turned out.
Serial killers who are attracted to law enforcement know that a police officer is in position to know a lot about potential victims, and they can approach people with a sense of authority by flashing a badge and getting people to go walk away with them.
We not only read, of course, what he wrote, every piece of paper was examined, everything was looked at for evidence. Not one piece ever had a fingerprint, had a hair, had a fiber that could be identified. And to me, that's why he feels confident in sending these letters.
You would get these mailings and they would be in all kinds of bizarre shapes. I thought there might be something symbolic about what he was sending. It was just the fact he thought he might have touched it and he didn't want anyone to see his fingerprints.
Rader has an attitude that he is smarter than other people because he's more vigilant, he's more attuned, he watches people as a predator in ways that most people are not doing. So as he's also developing knowledge about law enforcement and investigation procedures and forensic practices, that's just increasing his sense of, now I know what to do, and no one will be able to touch me. Studying that is very important to our understanding of serial killers, because if they really believe they are untouchable, that's where they'll make their mistake.
As my partner and I tried to puzzle out what we could do to advance the case, really the only thing that we knew of that he had created and touched, held, was the communications. Now, the letters were typewritten and then copied multiple times. In 1978, there was not a copy machine on everyone's desk. So we sent a detective to hand carry the evidence to Rochester and had Xerox work with the material for about a week.
They were able to trace one of those copies by looking at the fracture and scratch marks that were present on the plate that you laid the copying material on.
And they were able to trace the two copy machines back to public use copy machines, the kind where you just put a nickel in the slot and make a copy. One was in the basement of a building at Wichita State University, and the other one was on the second floor of the public library, actually where the first Otero letter was found. The one thing that we did not have before was that somehow this perpetrator had a connection to Wichita State.
One of the people that went to our church worked with Xerox. So he eventually figured out one of my original letters came from the copies from WSU. He was that sharp enough that, whoa. After I found that out, whatever I copied, I didn't send that in. I went to different copies before I sent it in.
After you knew that they had traced your Xeroxing to Wichita State, did it scare you that they were closing in on you?
It did. I was prepared for the police to come knocking on the door. There were times when I thought they were closing in, and I would move things around and kind of clean up a little bit. I had hidey holes here or there.
Rader would keep these journals to describe what he was doing. He had his own drawings, plus he had various items for his hit kits. As these things piled up, he needed places to secure them against anyone finding them and figuring things out. So basically the items from both his murders and his fantasies went into these hidey holes.
I had some cabinets at home that I could hide stuff in. There was a shed. I had old barns I hid stuff in. And then I had hidey holes underneath the house, crawl space, and I had hidey holes up in the attic.
During my work with Dennis Rader, one of the things he made for me was a map of these hidey holes. The map itself indicates the various places around Wichita he would have gone to hide some things. Like he would find an abandoned piece of equipment that had sat there for months, so it looked like nobody was going back to it. So he might use that as a temporary stash. He buried a few things. It was important for him to have this rigidity, this regularity of the map, which is exactly the way he lived his life. And after 1979, BTK seemed to have vanished.
BTK all of a sudden just kind of disappeared from public eye. There were no murders that we knew of. Everything kind of died down and started to get back to normal in Wichita, Kansas.
You got Wichita all in a frenzy over a serial killer, and then you went quiet. What were you doing?
Well, Harry was born in 78.
Right.
Fatherhood was big for me at that time. And I graduated in 79, so there was another factor. I did not have time to do anything in the evenings.
When you ask an expert why a serial killer stops, they normally are going to tell you they die or they are in prison and can't have access to other victims. But he said he was always hunting. It just had to be perfect for him to decide to go forward with a hit.
He liked his family life, and he liked the idea that he was BTK and nobody knew.
Stalking and that stuff never completely stopped. Basically collecting detective magazines and sketches and slip cards and 3x5, that continued.
Dennis, he would get 3x5 index cards, and he would cut out pictures of models out of advertisements, and he would affix it to the card, and then on the back he would give her a name and characteristics, likes and dislikes, and then he would put a card in the seat beside him as he would ride around, and he would, you know, I'm spending the day with Sally or whoever. It was like he had a relationship.
He would talk dirty to this 3x5 card, the slick ad. Then before the family would get home, he would go get in the shower with his card and masturbate. That was his preferred means of sexual gratification. And he said that's why you don't have more victims dead, because I enjoyed playing with myself as much as I enjoyed playing with others. Dennis Rader had the opportunity to travel the entire state of Kansas. And because he was traveling and living in motels, he said that gave him the opportunity to practice his bondage.
The only time I had to do anything would be out of town. That's when the motel parties started.
One of the things that Rader did to kind of compensate for the fact that he didn't have time for victims was come up with what he called motel parties. And The motel parties were autoerotic kinds of activities. He had dolls that he used to help facilitate his imagination, and he would experiment.
I'd work up a sexy frizzy by doing bondage. A lot of times I'd have pictures of the girls and go through that, lay them out, rearrange them, look at them, or bring things out from the hidey holes of my collection that I got from victims.
Rader often would take items from his victims' homes that he could then use to replicate what he had done to them, but in an autoerotic sort of scenario. So he might dress in a slip or pantyhose or underwear that he had taken and imagine what it must have been like for one of his victims to know that they were about to die.
I bought a nice big suitcase and had a lock on it. When I was packing up and ready to go out of town, I would take enough of those things with me. When Paula was at work and I had time off, I would wash all the stuff, clean it all up, and try it out. And I started to be real careful I didn't leave anything in there. And then I'd hide that back in my regular closet.
Rader grew careless, and there were times when he would use the privacy of the home to do some of his autoerotic activities, dress himself in a woman's slip, maybe his wife's, put a noose around his neck. And at one point, his wife came home unexpectedly.
My wife caught me twice, and boy, she was really upset, and I was upset because I got caught. She just told me, "This is it. You ever do this again, I ever catch you, we're going to leave. They're going to take the kids. We're going to divorce you." I made sure that would never happen again.
I think the fact that Rader had put his marriage and his family and his whole life on the line when he was indulging in his autoerotic activities speaks to the addiction of it, but also his belief that he was really smarter than people, he was special, and he just wasn't going to get caught. There was a time where you thought about suicide.
Yeah, I put a 357 in my mouth. I just felt to a point where maybe it was the man upstairs or something with the family. I thought the time has come. I'm basically stalking somebody else. So I got another person I'm going to set up for. I need to end this because I'm going to take somebody's life again.
You put a loaded 357 in your mouth?
Yep. I was just in that mood to take my life.
And what did it feel like when you didn't pull the trigger and you put the gun down? Then what? Then what went through your mind?
I guess I chickened out. I just couldn't do it.
Well, it sounds like you gave it a lot of thought. Was that about having regrets and remorse?
That may be. I feel guilty to a degree. At one time, I was more religious than I am now. I thought, well, gosh, if indeed heaven does exist, what will my grandparents think of me while I'm doing all this? But my concept on religion right now is a lot different than it used to be.
Okay. I wouldn't call it remorse so much as just, how did my life get this way? Maybe I should end it before I do anything to anyone else. But I think those moments were pretty temporary.
The first thing you have to realize about psychopaths is they're wired different. They don't feel emotions the same way regular people do. The best way to describe a psychopath dealing with emotions like guilt or shame or remorse, which don't exist for them, is if emotions are color, they're colorblind. Regular people in the normal population, we can look at a traffic light and see red for stop, yellow for caution, green for go. A psychopath, they learn, okay, the light at the top means stop, the light in the middle means caution, the light at the bottom means green, but they don't see the colors. They're just following the norms and customs and laws in society, which, if you're a psychopath, don't apply to them.
Dennis had a number of jobs, which he was able to travel. He worked in a security company. After he lost that job, he worked for the Census Bureau. That let him go to other states where he had the opportunity and took the opportunity to at least watch for victims, sometimes stalk them, and even plan for doing something to them. In one town, he actually dug a grave for someone that he believed he was going to murder.
Is there a possibility that there could be more murders? The one thing that bothered me in reviewing the Otero files was it was difficult for me as a homicide investigator to grasp the idea that a person's first killing would be 4 members of a family. How do you control and commit 4 murders, and very calculated murders? I mean, bringing weapons with you, bringing the instruments of binding, everything, it just didn't seem plausible to me.
Because he did take out-of-state trips during a time period when he talked about the urge or factor X being very strong. I think it's possible there might be other victims. So if there are, I want to be the person he tells that to. Remember the dream you sent to me? I want to read that back to you and see if you have anything to say about it. Do you mind? Okay, so the dream was about a boxcar, and here's what you wrote. One end had an old-fashioned barber shop, like my grandpa Cook had. In my dream, I'm working on a letter to you, so it is spread out on the table. I get my call number for a haircut and realize there is too much stuff left out for eyes to see. So I walk back to put it into my black briefcase. Then the alarm clock goes off in my dream, and I'm trying to shut it off, and at the same time, 2 police officers come in. One taps me on the shoulder and says, "We know you did more than 10. Then I awake to find out the real alarm clock is buzzing away. I've always really wondered about that dream and what it meant, and it sounded like you meant some very dark things.
It does.
The dream suggests he's about to tell me something that the police already suspect, because there are 2 officers who come in, and it has to do with his darkest secrets that he might have been about to tell me and then decided not to. Saved by the bell, because the actual alarm was actually ringing and woke him up. This is a dream you had, and you wrote it to me. What do you think it means?
Yeah.
Could he be holding something back? Yeah. Serial killers often do, because one of the things they're motivated by is power and control. And if he has a little secret, a little dirty secret, that could be just the piece of power and control that he maintains, and he's got to have something.
You're clearly protecting secrets in this dream, and it is related to your BTK activities. I'm really curious about what else there is that you would want to tell me.
Well,
this dream is related to your BTK activities, and it is something that you're writing to me, but you don't want other people to find it.
I kind of recall a little bit about the writing that, but I sure don't recall all the detail. But basically, as I told the police, Ken is it.
Okay, well, let's continue this, thinking about this conversation. And if you do have things that you could write down, that would be great.
Okay, all right, I will do that for you, okay.
His explanation for it is pretty superficial and deflective. And I think maybe he regrets sending it to me. Whenever Rader would decide somebody was going to be a victim, they immediately were dehumanized entirely. They became pawns in his game. They were projects. He doesn't think of victims as human beings. He doesn't think about the repercussions on their family members. Even today, it's still so difficult to get him to admit that they were human beings, and he caused a great deal of catastrophic trauma in the lives of all the people who knew and loved them. And that was certainly the case with Maureen Hedge. We're in the neighborhood of Park City, where Dennis Rader lived on Independence Street. And just down the street was a neighbor named Maureen Hedge. She was a 53-year-old woman who lived alone, had no dog, seemed to have a male friend who came in and out but didn't live there.
I walk by one of the blocks or something like that. I just wave at her, say hi. She's usually out in the front yard tending her flowers.
And then one day, when he was looking at his window and he saw her out there, he imagined his hands around her throat. At that point, Maureen Hedge became a project. And he had been dormant for 7 years. He hadn't done anything, and suddenly he decides not only does he need to kill her, but he's going to kill a neighbor.
Rader was a Cub Scout leader, and he used that to stalk victims and to kill victims when the opportunity would arise. He planned a night out with his Cub Scouts. Once he got them bedded down, he would drive to Park City.
He gets to Maureen Hedge's house, cuts the phone wire. Her car's in the driveway, but the house is dark. He broke in and realizes she's not home. Apparently she's out on a date. But then he hears a car door. He went into her closet in her bedroom and heard the two of them come in.
That was a long wait. I had to wait a long time in the closet. And I bet I spent an hour and a half in that closet before he left. But he left, and then she went to bed.
That's when Rader made his move. But what was interesting in this is he was going to change his signature behaviors, aside from cutting the phone line. He was going to take her body out.
His plan then was to take her to the church. He had keys to the church as a member of the governing body of that church. Took her to the basement, staged her in various positions, took photographs with his Polaroid, and then disposed of the body.
We start seeing these big changes in between his crimes. He's getting more emboldened, and in being more emboldened and more narcissistic, he's simultaneously getting more reckless, sloppy, and disorganized.
My name is David Zickel. I was a police officer for the city of Park City. April 28th, 1985, I was working the day shift. Early in the morning, I got a call to check the welfare of Maureen Hedge. She hadn't reported for work, and that was very unusual for her. When Maureen wasn't found in her house, we made a missing person report on her. Then her car was found a few days later at a bowling alley in Northeast Wichita, and everybody kind of figured that something foul had probably occurred.
The body was discovered here at 53rd Street North, just east of Webb Road, a bit west of the area that police had been searching all weekend for some clue to the disappearance of 53-year-old Maureen Hedge.
There wasn't any suspects right away, so when her phone line was cut, we thought that was very suspicious, but we didn't know for sure it was BTK or a copycat, but we did have that in the back of our head that, you know, BTK had never been captured and this could be something, but she wasn't left in the house. She was removed from it.
You think you could participate in church activities while at the same time harming other people?
Yes, I did.
Didn't it seem to violate what you believed?
I know people are saying, wow, what you did with Mrs. Hedge in the church, you know, the house of God, doing something like that, terrible. But I hadn't had any, what I guess you would call real bondage-type pictures of a female.
You can argue all kinds of things about what's going on in his head, but practicality, I'm the president of the church, I've got keys to get in, I know when people are there. This is a pretty safe place where I'm not going to be seen or interrupted doing all of everything what I've got to do.
But when you first decided to use a room in the church to bring a body, to dress, to take pictures of, did it seem weird? Like, why would you even think of using the church?
No, it was a way to get what I wanted done.
After Maureen Hedges' murder, BTK did not surface and claim responsibility for that.
The reason he did not communicate anything to police or any media was she was in his neighborhood. So the last thing he wanted to do was have police focused on his very street. But time passed, and again, no one suspected the killer was living among them. So Rader began planning his next murder.
Rader would drive through scouting or trolling for potential victims. And that's how he picked Vicki Wegerle. One day as he was driving by, he saw her come out of the house and she drew his interest.
That place was not what I call my typical casing. The only opportunities that I had to really look for my next victim was around lunchtime, and I would drive over there and eat, and then I'd watch her place from my car. I used my rust of the telephone man. I had the hard hat on and the little symbol I stuck on it, and some gear that looked like telephone gear, you know, in my hands.
He then went to Vicki Wegerle's house, talked his way in, that he needed to go look at her phone.
She was very, very nervous and was watching him like a hawk. Her baby was playing on the floor in the front room. She said her husband was going to be home at noon. And at one point, he was fiddling with the phone like he was working on it. And when she turned her head to check on the baby, he pounced on her.
Didn't you know that her husband was coming home?
She mentioned it, but I thought, well, she may be lying on that. That was a big risk. It really was in the middle of the day, around noontime. So that was a big risk that my focus was on her.
When her husband came home and found the baby and not her, he was initially upset, you know, that what's Vicki doing? You know, thought she'd gone to the store and left the baby there. But then when he walked back in the bedroom and saw that there was some comforters that were kind of disarrayed, he said, I knew that Vicki wouldn't leave the house like that. So he searched a little further in, and that's when he found his wife tucked under the bed, kind of secreted under the bed.
By the time police got to Vicki Wegerle's house on West 13th, her heart had already stopped beating. She died within 15 minutes at Riverside Hospital. Her husband, Bill, supposedly found Vicki with a noose around her neck.
Whenever raiders targeted someone, the callousness just sets in. And anything that that particular victim is associated with goes along with it. It's really striking to me that Rader, as a family man, has absolutely no concern about young children in a home where he has targeted a victim.
At that time, the police accused her husband and just couldn't prove that it was him. They really thought that was him.
After they interviewed him, that went unsolved. Never in a million years did people tie it to BTK, had any idea. Police were investigating it as a random act, and it just basically never was solved.
Did you ever think about what it would be like for you if somebody entered your home and did something like that to your wife?
I would have stepped in and fought him for sure, doing everything possible to protect my wife or my kids.
But I mean, what if you found her dead, murdered? What would that have been like for you?
Oh, that would have been very upsetting. It's like revenge to come back home there.
When I asked him what would happen if he came home and found someone had murdered his wife, there's no sense of outrage or horror that somebody could have done this to his family. It's more resignation. Ah, well, karma. Instead of empathizing with his loved one's suffering, he's only able to see how their possible demise would affect him. Rader was in his mid-40s. By this time, he had accomplished 9 murders without anyone suspecting him at all.
Well, I was building, I guess, toward what I call the perfect murder.
This is a bridge near Sedgwick, which is north of Park City. And underneath here is where the 10th victim of Dennis Rader was found in 1991. She had been here approximately 10 days before someone from one of the farms came across the body.
Mom's name was Dolores, but people called her Dee. She was such a loving, giving person, and that's how I want people to remember her. She's that star that shines a little extra bright because of what she was in this earth and what she endured to leave this earth. And I think that's really important.
Dolores Davis was the last victim of Dennis Rader. She became a project, as he called them. He was out in that area, saw her out in the yard, thought it would be pretty easy to get to her as a victim.
There was a Boy Scout, a winter camp out for 2 nights. So he had various ways he could say where he was going to be, so an alibi.
She had a date that evening, a dinner date, with her friend who she'd been seeing. They went back to her place early evening. He went home. As far as I know, she went to bed under normal circumstances at about 10 o'clock. And somewhere before midnight, he made his move.
He just took a cinder block and threw it through the patio glass.
She thought the car had run into her house because I broke the back door. And I thought to myself, what if she stepped out of that door with a shotgun?
He said, I'm on the run from the cops. I just need your car and some money. I'm going to tie you up to give me a head start so I get away from here before you call any authorities. And so he took her to the bedroom, tied her up. He leaned over and whispered in her ear, I'm BTK, I'm a bad dude.
A lot of people think it's the inflicting the pain they enjoy, but that's just a tool. The worry, the fear, the suffering, that's what he really enjoyed.
I'm sure then she knew she was doomed. I shudder to think about it. Killed her with her own pantyhose in her own bedroom. So just the terror is palpable.
He took her body to a location, country road, under a bridge. And there he posed her in different positions, took some pictures.
After Rader hid Dolores Davis's body, he went back to the scout camp and snuck back in. A missing persons report had been filed for Dolores Davis by her boyfriend the morning after she disappeared. When police saw her broken window and that a jewelry box was missing, they put out an all-points bulletin searching for a perpetrator. Rader sneaks out of the Boy Scout camp again the next night to go back to the body. It's still bound with the pantyhose and whatnot, but nobody has discovered it yet. On the way back to camp this time, Rader goes to a rest area to change his clothes back into his Boy Scout leader clothes. And when he's in the stall, a trooper comes in. Trooper says, a crime has happened. We're looking for people who just look out of place. Rader was worried because at this point he had the jewelry box in the car, and he knew if they asked to look in the trunk of the car, they would see those items that were clearly not his and would have then been related back to Dolores Davis.
I said it's all over. Lord, good Lord. My wife, my kids, and my family, friends are going to know all about it. Here I am caught like a rat in a trap.
So Rader talks about the Boy Scout camp nearby. I'm just here on my way back to it. Trooper says, okay, you're not the kind of person we're looking for. And Rader goes back to the Boy Scout camp and is not a suspect in this crime. Rader made him feel like, well, an ordinary guy like this who volunteers for the Boy Scouts couldn't possibly be the person we're looking for. If your job was to question everybody and look in their cars, then you do that even with somebody who volunteers for the Boy Scouts. If I were using this case to inform law enforcement, I would show how an officer in the case actually made an error that let Rader go free because he adhered to the stereotypes.
The enormity of what I was afraid had happened. Part of the frustration, the pain, was the fact that we knew so little. We had no witnesses. The car was clean of prints. There was nothing in the house. They had nothing to go on, really.
The police did consider that certainly Hedge and Davis were part of BTK. I think they even thought Wegerle might be. But there were a lot of differences. Why would there be so much time between number 9 and number 10? It didn't make any sense at the time.
What we didn't know is BTK was going to the store with us. He was eating popcorn at the movies with us. He was going to church with us. He was the guy next door.
I can't tell you, when BTK reappeared, how shocked everybody was.
We didn't know if BTK was going to show up in our bedroom.
I can't even describe how frightening it was.
He had followed me home, and then he started stalking me.
I was in the mood, but I had my hit kit, trying to get more notches on my gun.
That was our first sighting of what we believed was BTK.
I was just moving up the ante a little bit.
Dennis Rader has gotten away with this for 30 years.
We were in the newsroom going, oh my gosh.
It regenerated the fear in Wichita.
I was going to do something. I was at the height of my eruption.
That was one of those moments you were just ecstatic.
My name is Cheryl Sarkozy. I'm a survivor of BTK.